Next Pats podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. We are post-Patriots minicamp, which means we have all sorts of observations that we have to get to, that we have to share with you all. And we're going to do that in a number of different ways today. Lots to get to here. We're going to go through first our stock up, stock down, little stock watch for you. That's something that we like to do during the season after every game, but we'll do it now that we've seen these guys practice at least twice, right? Bill Belichick canceling that third mandatory minicamp practice to go paintballing, but we do have those two practices that the entire group, essentially the entire group, was there for, and a handful of OTAs. So we'll go stock up, stock down for the Patriots based on our observations. We're also going to do a quick run through of our most recent 53-man roster projection. I know you guys love those. We won't go through every position. That'll be on the website. You can go check out the entire thing there, all 53 names there, but we will highlight a couple of critical position groups that I found to be a little bit difficult when it came to narrowing down the roster to 53 names. We've got a number of questions. Thanks so much to everybody that's leaving reviews on our Apple Podcast comment section. This thing has been lit up the last few weeks, so we really appreciate that. We're going to give some shout outs there. We also got some questions, on Twitter. So I'll have a written mailbag later this week, but we'll get to a few of those here on the podcast. And then we've got a great interview. I'm telling you, loaded podcast today. I don't care that it's June. We're still hitting you over the head, pounding you with content. Our interview this week is with Troy offensive coordinator Joe Craddock, because there's one name, and we're going to talk about him right now on our stock up list, is Jake Andrews. He impressed me in terms of the amount that they gave him through minicamp, through the OTAs. Felt like they gave him more and more as time went on. And we have a great interview with his offensive coordinator down at Troy, at Alabama. He has all sorts of interesting things to say about Jake Andrews in terms of how strong this guy is, how tough he is, what kind of leader he is, what kind of offense they ran at Troy, and why he's a great fit for the Patriots. So you're going to love that conversation. But let's start with our stock wash. Stock up, stock down following minicamp. Let's start with stock up. We're going to start with Marte Mapu. The hype train is officially full steam ahead. It might just be off the rails, guys. That's how much praise this guy is getting from not only those of us in the media that had the opportunity to watch these practices, but from his teammates. Matthew Judon this week mentioning the names Jamie Collins and Dante Hightower in terms of Mapu being a versatile option who can play a variety of different roles. He runs like a free safety, but he stands like a linebacker. The Patriots have had him playing linebacker. He's listed as a linebacker on Patriots.com. But he played a lot of safety this week. He even played in the slot a little bit and some man coverage on tight ends. So they're using him all over the place. He's performed well, too. He's always around the ball, seemingly. He had a nice interception on Bailey Zappi. He got his hands on the football multiple times over minicamp. He is still wearing that red non-contact jersey because he's still dealing with that pick injury. But this looks like a guy who could have a real role in a deep safety group. Not as deep at linebacker, so maybe we see him more there. But he really looks like a safety, and he's running well. That was the one question that I know the league had on him. Does he have the range to play safety at the next level after coming from Sac State? So far, so good on that front. We'll see how it looks when the pads come on, but he has to lead us off on the stock up list because the praise has been off the charts. You know, Jabril Peppers talking about how smart he is, what kinds of instincts he has. These guys don't just throw around compliments for rookies, especially third-round rookies. But in my opinion, at least to this point, Mapu has earned the praise. Okay, also on the stock up list, I had Mac Jones there because, remember, going into the spring, and I think it will continue to be a conversation going into the summer, people are wondering, is this a real quarterback competition? In my opinion, it's not. So that's why Mac Jones' stock is on the rise. Was it a perfect minicamp for Mac Jones? No. Threw an interception to Jack Jones, who's also on our stock up list here, on a ball that I thought hung a little bit for Hunter Henry. Deep down the field, Jack Jones was able to peel off his coverage, high point the football, make a great play. But Mac Jones really did flash to me high-end accuracy. And again, it's passing camp, no pads, shorts and T-shirts. I get it. But on some of these seam passes to Hunter Henry, Mike Gesicki, down the field, into tight coverage, deep crossing routes to both of those tight ends. Again, tight coverage here. Those guys aren't monster separators, right? So they're consistently going to be covered. but Mac Jones putting the football only where those guys can get it for the most part. Some really accurate throws over the course of 2 days of camp. 2 high-pointed jump balls to Devontae Parker. He still clearly feels very comfortable lobbing it up to Parker when he sees the matchup is there, right? So Jonathan Jones is on Devontae Parker early, one-on-one, no safety help over the top. Totally comfortable lobbing it 35 yards down the field for Devontae Parker to climb the ladder and make a touchdown catch. So Mac Jones, for me, especially based on some of the conversations we were having going into OTAs and minicamp, stock up. Jack Jones, stock up. Just mentioned him consistently around the ball. Guys, he looks like a starter on the outside. He has those types of instincts. He is a magnet for the football. I think the size will continue to be a question. Do teams run at him the way the Packers did? If you remember, he had that pick 6 in that Packers game, but late in that Packers game with Jack Jones on the field, they ran at him and ran at him and ran at him on these wide zone runs or these stretch outside runs, pitches to the outside to Jack Jones's side. Even if he was switching sides of the field, they found him in the run game, which isn't something you usually hear in the NFL, but he's so slight. I think they saw an advantage there and they were able to take advantage. Now, I don't remember a team taking advantage of him that way as the season wore on. So maybe the Patriots were able to, quote unquote, hide him to a degree on early downs. And maybe they'll have to continue to do that. But I think his upside is such in the pass game that you got to get him out there. So maybe a first-year guy in Christian Gonzalez on one side, a second-year guy in Jack Jones on the other for the Patriots starting defense. That's, in my opinion, how it should look week 1 as of now in mid-June. Mike Gesicki, stock up as well. I felt like there was already chemistry between Mac Jones and Gesicki. The two saw all kinds of reps there together. They were consistently on the field together with Hunter Henry as well. So, 12 personnel is going to be a big part of what this offense does in competitive periods of practice. Okay. So not all throws are competitive, and you have to be there and you have to watch closely. And I think you have to be accustomed to Patriots practice in particular to be able to tell what's competitive and what's not. So when we give you numbers, just know, I know these are competitive snaps. Anytime there's a question, they're not competitive. Sometimes they'll play 75% until the ball gets there. To me, those aren't real reps. Sometimes they'll just start out 50% or less and do sort of a walking tempo. That's terminology that the Patriots will use. Those are not competitive snaps. I will not be throwing numbers at you that include those types of plays. So a lot of times you'll find, I think, relative to some of my Patriots beat brethren, some of the numbers, the overall numbers, the volume of throws might be smaller, and it's because I'm only including the reps that I know were competitive. For Gesicki, in competitive periods, he and Mac Jones connected on 7 of 8 targets. That's pretty good for a guy who's just coming into the offense, especially just coming into the passing offense. We know how hard it is sometimes for receivers to adapt once they get here. Tight end, there's just as much, if not more, on your plate because you have to factor into the run game. We'll see how Gesicki fares as far as that goes when training camp rolls around and they do put the pads on. But so far, so good for Mike Gesicki. It looks like he's catching on and catching on quickly. Jake Andrews, again, to me, he's stock up. He was the top right guard by the end of minicamp. It's minicamp. I get it. Doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot, especially on the offensive line. But with Mike Onwenu out recovering from surgery, it was Jake Andrews. Bill Murray saw some time in there next to David Andrews. We spoke about Antonio Mafi. Did our podcast on Mafi with Eric Galko because Mafi was part of the Shrine Bowl. Eric Galko, helping run the Shrine Bowl there, give us all kinds of great intel on Antonio. He was working alongside David Andrews at one point at right guard. Looked like he dealt with an injury earlier in the spring workouts and started wearing a red jersey over the course of the last few practices. So it was Jake Andrews who stepped in. He was also, it looked like, by the end of minicamp, the number 2 center behind David Andrews. So again, we'll talk much more about Jake Andrews with his OC, Joe Craddock from Troy, later in the show, but he was stock up for me. Stock down, Trent Brown. We talked a lot about Trent Brown on the Patriots Talk podcast. That's a pretty obvious one if you're following along. He missed the first minicamp practice, and then he essentially was gone the entirety of the second minicamp practice, even though he was present. Did one drill, pulled himself out of the next drill, it looked like, helmet on top of his head, hands tugging on his jersey, and then he was escorted down to the lower field. I don't know how much conditioning he did, if any, down there. We weren't able to see the action on the lower field, but stock down for sure with Trent Brown. Huge question mark, literally, figuratively, every sense there for Trent Brown. Riley Reif, he was stocked down for me as well because it looked like he was, again, I'm not reading too much into depth chart stuff at this point in the year, but it's one of the few things you can kind of read into. I think it's harder, especially on the lines, to read into actual performance. But Riley Reif was pretty consistently behind Connor McDermott at right tackle with the second group. This is a guy who got about $4 million guaranteed to be one of your top 3 tackles, and he looks like number 4 by the time the spring workouts had ended. I had Bailey Zappi in my stock down category, and it wasn't because when he was with the ones, which was brief, right? In the couple practices that we saw lately, he did get some reps with the ones, and he got the full ones, including David Andrews, which is rare, during one period and one stretch of plays on Tuesday. So the second minicamp practice, he went actually 5 for 5 with that group. He took a sack at one point, but it looked clean with that group. It was the other stuff where I thought he struggled at times. You know, there were throws into the flat that just didn't get to their target. And I don't know if that's because that's a footwork thing and he can't really get his body behind it. We know he doesn't have an incredibly live arm. You know, I would say, you know, people say the same about Mac Jones, and it's true. He's not an upper echelon arm strength guy in the NFL, no doubt. But his arm is stronger than Bailey Zappi's, in my opinion, and in the opinion of those in the league. And so that sort of had me scratching my head. Some of those short throws to the flat that didn't get to where they needed to be. And there were just bouts of inaccuracy, I felt, throws late and behind receivers. And it's always hard to tell, okay, did the receiver run that route a little too deep? And was the timing off because he couldn't get off a jam or something to that effect? And that makes the throw look worse than it really was. But you saw a number of those types of throws. You saw one throw on an out to Scotty Washington that just wasn't close. It was, you know, a good, 5 feet or so out of bounds. That just didn't give Washington a chance to even get his hands on it at one point. There was clear miscommunication at one point, throw deep down the field. Again, is that on Zappi? Is that on the receiver? Bill O'Brien, not happy because we could see him in the background just sort of hang his head after that one because the ball is bouncing and there's nobody within 30 yards of the thing. So he just dealt with things in such a way where, again, it wasn't perfect for Mac Jones, but it felt like Zappi consistently had a harder time getting the football on target than Jones did. And where Jones had these flashes of high-end accuracy, those weren't there in the same way for Zappi, especially down the field. Tyquan Thornton, he's stocked down, dealt with injury, missed a bunch of practice. I'm not sure what else to say about Tyquan Thornton until we see him on the field consistently and actually performing. If he's going to be a big part of this offense, he has to be available. He was not available for the bulk of the spring. I also had Kendrick Bourne as a stock down player. And here's why. You might feel good about Kendrick Bourne because at least he's on the field, right? Dependability is the most important ability, according to Bill Belichick. And at least he was out there, unlike Juju Smith-Schuster, unlike Tyquan Thornton. So he's there with Devontae Parker consistently with the ones. I have in my stock down category, though, because I don't know if pure availability is like the number one thing when you're talking about what you're hoping to see from players in this receiving group, where the passing game needs to be better, needs to be much better than not only last year, but 2 years ago. And Kendrick Bourne, somebody who had 800 yards with Mac Jones as a rookie, and you would love to see more growth from him and at least be able to get back to that and be a dependable option. Is he a dependable number 2 or even a great number 3? I just don't think anything we saw this spring from him would indicate that he's there. Again, it's the spring. There's plenty of time for him to improve or show us more. But he had a false start at one point that earned him a lap during minicamp. He also had a ball on a hurry-up period that was sent to him over the middle by Mac Jones, basically bounced off his bicep. Looked like he tried to catch it with his body, bounced off his bicep, popped up in the air, ends up getting picked off by Marcus Jones. Over the course of the 2 minicamp practices, he saw 5 targets in competitive periods from Mac Jones, catching 3. So again, relative to Mike Gesicki, who had 8, Devontae Parker was plenty busy. Same for Hunter Henry. Bourne is looking like, and then when you factor in all the checkdowns and the design plays that end up going to Ramondre Stevenson, who we know can catch the football, or Ty Montgomery, who got a lot of work with the ones, Kendrick Bourne sort of felt like the 5th out of 5 receiving options with that first team offense. And again, when he was given opportunities, they didn't all go great. So Kendrick Bourne is somebody who, for me, you would love to see more from, and that's why he's stocked down after 2 days of minicamp. All right, just a fun exercise there. I think it's a good way to sort of get a feel for how minicamp went, take us into training camp. Obviously, after training camp, we're going to be talking about how this team is going to look headed into September. Another exercise that we love to do here on the podcast, love to do it online. You can find this next piece online on NBCSportsBoston.com or on our shiny new app, the NBC Sports Boston app. Go download that thing if you haven't already. It's our 53-man roster projection. I'm not going to share with you every single position group here, but let's get into some of these position groups that I found to be a little bit interesting. Let's start with running back. I got 4 there. It's Ramondre Stevenson, Ty Montgomery, who I think is sort of in the pole position as the team's quote-unquote sub-back, just as a veteran type. But Pierre Strong is there as well as Kevin Harris. So Kevin Harris is looking like the guy to spell Ramondre Stevenson. And I hesitated a little bit there because I'm not sure I've seen anything from Kevin Harris to earn him this Damian Harris kind of role. But that's sort of what he's in line to be in 2023. And it makes me wonder if the Patriots might not be still looking at running backs. Obviously, we know they got rid of James Robinson. I don't think I ever had James Robinson on a 53-man roster projection. Maybe I did at one point in the offseason, but I don't believe I had him on my last 53-man roster projection. He always was going to be an injury risk for me. Follow the money, look at his contract, 0 fully guaranteed dollars. And as Albert Breer reported, he had 3 different injury waivers that he signed. When he signed with the team initially, 1 for each knee and 1 for one of his ankles, I believe. So, or may have been Achilles. Have to go back and check Albert's reporting there. Either way, we knew it was going to be hard for him to stay on the field, unfortunately, for James Robinson. But that's the foursome that I have with this group right now. And I wonder if they are just looking for a little bit more behind Stevenson, because you'd hate to be in a position that you were in 2015 where your backs got hurt and you signed Steven Jackson, big name, big body, but really your lack of running back depth that year in 2015 really hurt your team. And I'm somebody who looks at that running back position, and I know you can find talent anywhere. And generally speaking, you should not be overpaying for talent, but that doesn't mean it's not important to have capable pieces there going into the season, because it can be hard to find them midseason, as the Patriots, again, found out almost a decade ago now. So I just wonder if Kevin Harris is enough there to be their number 2, because at that position, number 2 can become number 1 really, really quickly. At receiver, sort of having some fun with this, because we have DeAndre Hopkins on the 53-man roster at receiver. As we speak, Hopkins is meeting with the Patriots. We're recording this on Thursday, but I didn't get rid of any of the other big names in the Patriots receiver room, even though Hopkins was brought aboard. I just think they need that depth. Again, injuries happen. Juju Smith-Schuster essentially missed the vast majority of the spring in terms of the on-the-field work. Kendrick Bourne, yeah, I have him in my stock down category. I'm not getting rid of him because I worry about injuries with this group. Even with Hopkins at 31 years old. I mean, I know he dealt with the suspension last year, was an injury that limited his playing time, but Hopkins, Parker, Tyquan Thornton, injury concerns there, in my opinion. Juju Smith-Schuster, Kendrick Bourne. I even have Pop Douglas still on the roster. So that's 6 receiver names. I think you want to try to be deep there. You have some veteran pieces. You have a nice mix of skill sets there, in my opinion, as well. DeAndre Hopkins and Kendrick Bourne, actually, if there was one guy who's sort of the odd man out, it might be Bourne, because I think their skill sets in some way are overlapping. Hopkins to me is a short to intermediate option for the most part, middle of the field for the most part kind of guy. You can play him in a lot of different spots, but he's not a deep threat. And I wouldn't even call him necessarily just a consistent boundary threat, which is really what Devontae Parker is. Now, he can do that stuff. But like Bourne, I think you can kind of use him everywhere. Tyquan Thornton, you know what he is. He's your speed option. Juju Smith-Schuster is your interior only option, essentially. Bourne is kind of your move him around, do a little bit of everything guy. And I think Hopkins would be similar. So if they are looking to move one of these, Pop Douglas would probably be the first to go if you're talking about just a 53-man roster projection. But if you're talking about roles, it's Bourne who might see the biggest hit, in my opinion, if Hopkins is brought aboard. Offensive line, still have Trent Brown around, have Riley Reif, have Calvin Anderson, have City So, all at tackle. Jake Andrews is sort of your do-it-all backup, but that's the 8 there is Brown, Strange, Andrews, Owenu, Reif, Anderson, Andrews, Jake Andrews, and So. I got 9 specialists on the roster, guys. 9. Is that too many? Not for Bill Belichick. Even with the change to the kickoff, I think there's some question in Foxborough as to whether or not this kickoff rule is even going to limit kickoffs all that much. I'm wondering how the new rules will be adapted to by special teams coaches, by return units specifically. Do you want to, especially if the rule is the college rule, and if you muff it, you get the football where it was muffed. If you raise your hand for that fair catch, that's the college rule. There's a risk there. Especially you're playing in Foxborough in November, December, and you want that ball at the 25, so you raise your right arm. If you muff it at the 2, now all of a sudden you're not at the 25, you're in the shadow of your own end zone. And so again, there is some risk there, and I wonder how willing teams will be to take that fair catch now that it's available to them. Either way, 9 specialists: Chad Ryland, Bryce Behringer, Joe Cardona. I wonder if Nick Folk, the same thing happens with Folk that happened to him a few years ago when they kept the kicker out of Michigan, Quinn Nordine. Remember Quinn Nordine? He actually did a press conference with us. What was it like to make the team, Quinn? And he was so excited, and he actually was a phenomenal interview for us. He soon thereafter was no longer on the 53-man roster, and it was one of those situations where Nick Folk's a veteran. If you have him on the roster week 1, is his salary fully guaranteed? Like they may play with some roster stuff there. I actually asked Bill Belichick if he would ever keep 2 kickers on his roster this season. And he said, yeah, we've done it before. You essentially you have one guy in the practice squad, but you call him up. You have 2 kickers active. Like we've done that. So I wouldn't completely rule out a Ryland Folk combo at kicker because Bill Belichick's not ruling it out. Now, if Ryland is making his kicks in training camp and in preseason, then it should be his job. The guy was a 4th-round pick. And you thank Nick Folk for everything he's done here because the guy's been one of your best players, period, the last several years. But if it goes a little sideways and you don't want to get rid of him because he is a 4th-round pick and you like his potential, maybe you keep Steady Eddie, Nick Folk, and Chad Ryland. Okay. The other specialists, if you're wondering, Matthew Slater, Brendan Schooler, Chris Board, Cody Davis, coming back off injury, Amir Speed, and Jordan Halig from App State, undrafted rookie. He has been attached at the hip with Matthew Slater. And generally speaking, whether it's Jonathan Jones or Brendan Schooler, or Brandon King, I'll put him in that mix as well, guys that attach themselves to Matthew Slater, and Matthew Slater's cool with it, and the special teams coaches are cool with it, those guys often make the team as special teams specialists. And that's been Halig. I thought it might be Amir Speed, because I know they like him as a special teamer, and I think he still could make it as a special teamer, but it's been Halig who has been that special team specialist right there with the old vet, Matthew Slater, all spring. So I think that's a good sign for him. Last position group we will do here is inside linebacker, Juwan Bentley, Jelani Tavai. I have Mac Wilson there. Again, another special teams guy. Bill Belichick's going to like that, but gives you speed at the second level. And I thought he had this is passing camp, right? I think that's where he's going to excel, as sort of a will linebacker in a sub situation who can also play the run. I know they love using their safeties at the second level there, but I've got Mac Wilson on for now. And I've got Marte Mapu as a linebacker, listed as a linebacker as well here, because I think that may be where he ends up playing, just because they're so deep at safety, it feels like right now. Duggar, Phillips, Mills, Peppers, those are my safeties on the 53, and they all can play back there. They can all play and play a variety of different spots in the secondary. Mapu can as well, and maybe he eventually works his way back there. It just feels like they're deeper at safety than they are at linebacker. So maybe that's where we end up seeing the rookie initially to start his pro career. Okay, go find the entire 53 on NBCSportsBoston.com. All right, we got some phenomenal reviews. Thank you guys so much. This is the lifeblood of the Next Pats podcast. So keep them coming. Really appreciate it. Jay Dumpy 68 checking in with a 5-star review. Still my favorite Patriots podcast. Appreciate you, Jay Dump. He says he has a prediction and a question. The prediction is that we're going to look back in a few years and identify this current draft class as the most influential foundation building draft since before the early 2010s when the second dynasty was built. That's saying a lot because I think these last few drafts have been fairly productive. You know, when you talk about 2020 with Duggar, Owenu, and Uche, and we'll see how many of those guys get extended and become core pieces of this team moving forward. But then 2021, Mac Jones and Christian Barmore and Ramondre Stevenson. I mean, if all of those guys hit and Mac Jones bounces back and Christian Barmore can stay healthy, that's one of the best drafts Bill Belichick has ever had. Then you're talking about 2022, Marcus Jones. We know he's going to be a contributor for this team. Jack Jones, I just said, looks like a starting outside corner. Cole Strange is going to be a starting guard. You know, whether or not we can argue whether or not they should have taken him there, but they got pieces in that 2022 draft. So if you love the 2023 draft, that's a good sign for the Patriots. And I think there are positive signs between Gonzalez, Mapu, Keon White. I thought he was limited now in minicamp. So maybe we should temper our expectations there for him if he's dealing with something physically, but they used him in a variety of different ways during the spring. And he's a freaky athlete. We've talked about it before. So I'm with you on the positivity with this year's draft class. The question from Dumpf is, with the Patriots likely having a new kicker and definitely a new punter, has there been any discussion on how the new scoreboard and end zone closure will positively or negatively affect the kicking game in 2023? Great question. I'm sure we'll hear a lot about it once they actually get into the stadium. Now, Cam McCord, Bill Belichick, they've been open about how it's going to impact them one way or another. I think they just are trying to figure out how exactly it's going to happen. It is going to cut down on the wind. That scoreboard is massive. We were doing TV in the stadium this past week after these minicamp practices. The thing is gargantuan. So there's no way it doesn't impact the swirling at times wind conditions that you get at Gillette. But there are still openings. And so I wonder if, does it create any kind of wind tunnel going under the scoreboard by where the Lighthouse Bridge was, if you could remember Gillette Stadium pre-scoreboard and pre-new Lighthouse. So that'll be sort of, for the kicking nerds out there, Jay Dumpf, you apparently are one, and we appreciate you for that. That'll be fun to find out. Gonzalez versus Gardner is our next topic, our next comment. This is from Andy FDC, 5-star review. Appreciate you, Andy. Hey, Phil, after hearing so much about Christian Gonzalez possibly lacking competitiveness, physically and mentally, and that likely being the reason he dropped from projected top 10 all the way to 17, it got me wondering what was being said before the 22 draft about Sauce Gardner's competitiveness. How do you believe they compared his college prospects overall coming out of college? Gardner was viewed as your prototypical alpha at corner, right? The big personality. I mean, his nickname is Sauce. I mean, a lot of confidence. I think that's where the main difference probably is between the two. Now, Gardner's a little bigger, a little longer too. I would say Gonzalez is maybe a little bit more athletic, although Gardner is a freaky athlete. Don't get me wrong, and he tested really well himself. But that's probably the primary difference is at least their perceived attitudes. Now, we talked to Gonzalez's head coach on this podcast, Dan Lanning, and he said he ain't Ty Law in terms of his personality. He doesn't need to tell you he's good, but he is focused. He's also 20 years old. So it may take him some time to kind of grow into whatever his personality is going to be as a pro. At PK USYK, I have no idea how to pronounce that, PK. But you say Dr. Knowledge, 5-star review. Phil, you are fantastic. Of course, I'm going to read this one. I appreciate your sincerity and approach to getting the facts. Keep it up. I look forward to your pod every week. Thank you, PK. Top shelf, A++. K Battle 33. Appreciate the review there. Qued 63. Another great 5-star review. Thanks so much, Qued. He says, any theories on why we haven't seen Juju just yet? My conspiracy is that Bill doesn't want anyone to see how he's being used. I don't think that's it, Qued. I think he's hurt. And he did practice early in the OTA period. So I believe it was May 23rd. He was out there. He was in uniform. He was participating. And we haven't seen him since. So he's dealing with something. I don't think this is I love the conspiracy theories. And if they're going to come with 5-star reviews, by all means, we'll take them all. I don't think that's the case with Juju, though, right now. B. Mathers says, love the podcast. Phil's a great analyst and has the best. Man, you guys are so nice. I really appreciate our listeners. We got the best listeners. Casey Durf, 5-star review. Thanks, Casey. TVH gives us a 4-star review, but then in the comments says, thanks, Phil, 5 stars plus. So I'm going to say this is a slip of the thumb. This might be I know I have fat thumbs, and that will lead to misspellings and some miscommunication at times. I'm going to say that could have been the case here with TVH, because he gives us this very positive review. He's a longtime Patriot fan who's relocated to California, and this podcast of his favorite team keeps him apprised of the true state of the team. I mean, thanks, Phil, exclamation point. 5 stars plus, exclamation point. I'm not making this up. And then he leaves us the 4-star review. Can you go back and edit? Can you add a star where you left off a star accidentally? These are questions that I need answered. Long Island Pats fan has the last one this week. 5-star review says, love the podcast, Phil. Been listening for years. In the hot take area, your analysis is measured and based in facts, not narratives. Appreciate you, Long Island Pats fan. Not sure if you were on the BC High teams that played Rutland, Vermont High, but that's my high school. John Carpenter. John, yes. Yes, we definitely did that. And I actually, maybe the highlight of my high school football career came at Rutland, Vermont, 80-yard touchdown run, right up the gut, practically untouched through the line of scrimmage. And here's why. We were holding, and that thing got called back. But you know what? It still looked great on the video. It looked great on the review. But I will never forget scampering 80 yards for a score and then turning around and having everyone's heads kind of hanging because laundry on the field. Ted Farino. Teddy, my guy, Teddy Farino got called for holding. But I'm not bitter. I'm not sore about it at all. We did win the game. That's and we had fun. So that's what matters, right? John, appreciate you checking in. All right, let's do a couple of our Twitter mailbag questions. We are going to have a mailbag on NBCSportsBoston.com, so go find it. If you presented me with a question on Twitter this week for the mailbag and I don't get to it here, that's where it is. NBCSportsBoston.com, great website. Joshua Culver says, sorry for the D-Hop hypothetical, but I trust your opinion. If he does want to wait until training camp to sign, do you think that takes the Pats out of the running? I'm split, because if the Pats wide receivers can get healthy and show something, then they may say, quote, actually, we're good. I don't think it would take the Patriots out of the running. I think they know that just because Tyquan Thornton and Juju Smith-Schuster are hurt now doesn't mean they necessarily will be during training camp. But I think they also know, and these injuries are a reminder of the fact that they do have some injury questions at that position, whether all of these guys are available and in uniform and on the field and practicing or not. You know, just because they're all out there in July and August for training camp doesn't mean that something's not going to happen in October or November. You just always have to be prepared for that happening. And I think especially with Smith-Schuster, especially with Parker, guys that have missed time in the recent past. Tyquan Thornton, I put in that group as well, just because of his body type. We need to see him stay on the field. You know, his body type being as thin as he is, plus being, quite frankly, as fast as he is. And I've heard Scott Zolak talk about that, and I think it's true. Some of these really ridiculously track athlete fast receivers have a hard time staying loose enough that they don't come away with soft tissue injuries. And I don't know if that's scientifically proven or what, but it does feel like the track speed guys, every once in a while, you see them pop up with a hamstring, pop up with a quad, pop up with a calf. You know, it was reported by ESPN that Thornton is dealing with a soft tissue injury right now. So that's my answer there, Josh, is I think they know that they need depth, even if all of those guys end up on the field for training camp. And if I'm the Patriots, I try to blow him away with money right now, quite frankly, and make it hard for him to say no, because the smart thing for him would be to wait. Not only because it limits his work this summer if he doesn't want to practice, but number two, you would wait if you're him, because say one of the receivers in Kansas City gets injured. And all of a sudden, the Chiefs get a little bit more desperate for receiver help. And all of a sudden, they're able to offer you a little bit more money as a free agent. Or same thing for Buffalo. Stephon Diggs, is he there? Is he not? A little bit of drama there. But whether something happens to him or to Gabe Davis, now all of a sudden they have a receiver need. These are teams that I think he would like to go to, all things being equal. But it sounds like at the moment, financially, they're not where he wants them to be. Maybe that changes come July if they get some injuries. So do whatever you can now to try to lock them up would be my opinion. All right, Sox Nation 0613 says, could Bill theoretically sign Hopkins and trade for a tackle such as Jonah Williams from the Bengals is who he's referring to? If not, which one of these moves at this point gets you closer to competing in the playoffs? D-Hop is the exciting pick, but it feels like a tackle is more important. It's a great question. They are two of the three most important positions in any offense. I would say for the Patriots, if you could somehow get Jonah Williams, that would just make them so much better, I think, on the offensive line and just so much more comfortable. What happened in Cincinnati is they signed Orlando Brown. They also have Lyle Collins. And now they have Jonah Williams, who's a starting caliber tackle who might be their third guy. The issue is right now for Hopkins, all he costs is money. For Jonah Williams, starting caliber tackles just never come available, ever. And so when those guys get traded, they get traded for a lot, generally speaking. That's what made the Trent Brown trade the first time around back in 2018 so valuable to the Patriots. Basically a pick swap kind of deal. It hardly cost them anything. And they got a guy who's going to start for them and help them win a Super Bowl. It doesn't happen. So while Jonah Williams might give you the higher floor, I think Hopkins as a receiver gives you the higher ceiling. And to me, that's the move you make because it's the easier acquisition right now because all it costs is money. Celtics Pride 86 has a similar tackle question here. He says, why does it seem like you and Tom Kern are suddenly in a panic over tackle? If Owenu and or So are not going to play tackle, we all knew they would be reliant on Brown, Reif, Anderson, McDermott. If they wanted to avoid this, draft a tackle. Then we would be obsessing over corner instead. Well, there's a lot there. Owenu's not a tackle, and we get questions on this every week. I know he's played there, and I know he has played successfully there. That's not how the Patriots view him. They've been very open about it. They're on the record about how they would rather. Bill Belichick, I believe, is on the record. I'll try to find the quote for a future pod. But they have openly shared with us their feelings that they would rather have Mike Owenu at guard than tackle. So he's not a long-term option for them at tackle. Could he play there in a pinch? Sure. All things being equal, they don't want him there. Sidy So, on the other hand, is working out at tackle. Do you want a fourth-round guy who is, I won't say new to the position because he played it as a freshman at Eastern Michigan, but is he all of a sudden going to step in for you and start? I would say it's unlikely, but I know they like how things are going so far for him there. Then it comes down to Reif, Anderson, and McDermott opposite maybe Trent Brown at the other spot. I think it's the combination of Brown not showing up ready for minicamp, Reif going from the top group right tackle consistently to now behind Connor McDermott, who is a fine option to have on your bench, but that's what he is. He's probably a 3 or a 4 in a good offensive line room at that tackle position, good third or fourth tackle. Calvin Anderson has never been a full season starter. There's a lot of questions with this group right now. And if they had come in and Brown was here for minicamp and looked good and Riley Reif had it locked down at right tackle, you would not be hearing what you're hearing from me and Tom and others about this all-important position. But the signs that we have so far, and I will acknowledge it's early, but the signs we have to this point are not good there. Would we be obsessing about corner if for some reason, the Patriots, for instance, drafted Broderick Jones in the middle of the first round this year, as opposed to Christian Gonzalez? I don't think we'd be obsessing over corner in the same way. I did think it was a need, but this was a relatively deep cornerback class. And so could they have, and again, I wouldn't have necessarily advocated for this because I remember, and if you listen to the podcast, you knew Going into the draft, there were concerns about Broderick Jones and his maturity and his makeup. Same for Darnell Wright. Now, maybe it'll work out great for those guys, but that's why I didn't kill them, and why I supported the drafting of Christian Gonzalez, because I think he, in terms of talent, he was the better talent, even at a different position. So could they have done something like Broderick Jones in the first round, and then Cam Smith, the corner out of South Carolina, height, weight, speed, has every trait, who went to 51 overall. Sorry, went to the Dolphins at 51 overall in the second round. And then, yeah, you don't get Keon White. You don't get that big body on the edge. But now you've taken care of 2 of your 3 biggest needs in your first 2 rounds. And you got the rare guy at tackle, because those guys go early if you think they can play. And you took advantage of some depth at the cornerback position. DJ Turner from Michigan, he was not the big body that you're looking for, but it would not surprise me if he starts soon for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's one of my favorite corners in the draft, one of the fastest guys in the draft, and scrappy, and just knows how to play. There are corners that went in the 3rd round that I think are going to be able to play. Garrett Williams is coming off an injury from Syracuse. Riley Moss is probably more of a zone corner from Iowa, but he can play. 3rd round pick. So this was a deep corner class, and maybe they could have leaned on that if they did not go with Christian Gonzalez. So I don't think the quote unquote obsession, and I get it, but I don't think it would have been to the same degree, or it didn't have to be to the same degree of what we're talking about with the tackle position right now. Okay, last question here from Rick Lawson at Rick Lawson EP. Possible offensive identity: run heavy, quick pass, long ball. Looking at our offensive players, where do you see a strength? Well, it's clear, Rick. I would say 2 things. Middle of the field, power run game. Okay? Middle of the field passing game with those 2 tight ends. We're going to see a lot of 12 personnel. Yes, you're still going to see Devontae Parker on the outside. And if DeAndre Hopkins comes, then things get adjusted again, right? But even he is a middle of the field option, in my opinion. You'll use him a bunch as a big slot, I would think. Working the middle of the field against the zones, finding soft spots, creating after the catch. That, to me, is going to be their offensive identity. So I would say not necessarily a short passing game, because I think Mike Gesicki will be a vertical threat. Devontae Parker is a vertical threat. Tyquan Thornton should be a vertical threat when he's around. So they don't have to be dink and dunk. And they don't have to be, 1-2 check down. It doesn't have to be that kind of offense. But the type of quarterback Mac Jones is, he's at his best with the football out of his hands, and out of his hands quickly, as Tom Brady used to always say about himself. Right? The longer that he's holding on to it, the worse off they are. So get it out of your hands. Allow your playmakers to make plays with the ball in their hands. Create space offensively so that there are catch and run opportunities for these tight ends, for Ramondre Stevenson, who's probably your most talented offensive weapon. But that, to me, is going to be the identity. Power run game, downhill, duo, power, counter, and middle of the field passing game. That's what takes advantage of your quarterback. That's what takes advantage of the personnel that you've surrounded that quarterback with. And that's where I think they're going to be most effective this coming season. Speaking of the power run game, look at this transition. Let's talk about a power run game blocker and Jake Andrews. We're going to talk to his offensive coordinator, Joe Craddock from Troy. Thanks to everybody for those questions. Thanks for the reviews. Love going through the offseason stuff with you. Let's get to this interview with Joe Craddock right now. All right, there he is. Joe Craddock, offensive coordinator for Troy, going to tell us a little bit here about Jake Andrews. Really excited to have you on, Joe. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So interesting for the Patriots to draft a center named Andrews. They've already got one of those. David Andrews has been a great player for a long time for them, but we know how Bill Belichick operates. Somebody like David Andrews certainly knows how Bill Belichick operates. He's planning for the future. And so Jake certainly seems like he's going to be in their plans for some time as a 4th-round pick. Were you surprised that it was the Patriots that ended up going with Jake? What was your reaction when you saw that he'd be going to New England?
I was really excited, to be honest. I've always been like a Patriots fan from a distance. I know we didn't talk about that a minute ago, but I've always admired what Coach Belichick does, and I've always watched the Patriots, rooted for the Patriots, as weird as that sounds, being from Alabama. But I just love what they do up there. So I don't think Jake could have went to a better place, and I don't think the Patriots could have got a better player.
So what makes you think that he'd be a good fit for them, knowing what you know about the Patriots? What's great about covering the Patriots, Joe, is that even if you're not a Patriots fan, because Bill Belichick has been there for 20 years and the culture has been consistent and he's been so consistent, everybody who's a football fan essentially, kind of knows what the Patriots stand for. But you obviously, it sounds like, are following them more closely than others. What makes this a good marriage?
I think just Jake understanding he's been a pro for a while now. I mean, he's understood how to work like a pro. He's a blue collar guy. He's going to be the first one in the building, the last one to leave. His consistency day in and day out. It's just going to be a very good fit for him. And I think he'll be able to transition to the Patriots very well.
Well, you talk about transitions. He made a positional transition. It seems like, from what I've read about Jake and his time with you, going from guard to center. How did he handle that? Why did you make the move to have Jake in the middle of your offensive line there, Joe?
Well, when we first got to Troy, we didn't really have a center. Our center that was playing before we got there was graduating, and he was done with his playing career. So we had to have somebody get us a snap on every play and make all the mic points. And Jake, being as smart as we kind of figured out how smart he was early on, and found out he could snap, and so we naturally moved him in that spot because that was going to be a big key for us going into last season, is who was going to solidify that center position. So it was kind of a, easy decision for us. He was our best lineman. He was probably the smartest lineman. And so it was an easy transition for us. He just had to work constantly on snapping, wasn't something that he had done for a while. He had done it before, but just not a lot. And so had to get him a lot of snaps. And once he kind of got that going, he was definitely smart enough, making our mic points and getting us going in the right direction.
Yeah, you mentioned the mic points. I did want to ask you just a little bit about some of the responsibilities he had in your offense, and just ask you a little bit more about your offense too, Joe, for those of us in the New England area that may not be able to watch a ton of Troy football. What was it that you guys did offensively that might translate run game, pass game for Jake at the next level? And how much were you asking him to do at the line of scrimmage there? The last few years, the offense here in New England has changed a little bit. And obviously when Tom Brady was here, he had a lot of responsibility at the line of scrimmage himself that he wanted on him. But they do ask their centers to do quite a bit. So I just was curious about some of the things schematically you asked Jake to do. And then in terms of, maybe pre-snap, what you're asking of him as well.
Yeah. Pre-snap, he made every one of our mic points, got us going in the right direction. We taught him to read coverages and see safety rotations and make the right calls based off where those guys were lining up. He got us going in the right direction on every play. And so schematically, we ran a lot of duo last year. We hired Cole Popovich from the New England Patriots. I think Cole obviously knew some things that would help him out and kind of develop him, obviously. And Cole did a phenomenal job with Jake last year. But schematically, duo, a little bit of power, counter, all those things that you see everybody doing is kind of what we were doing as well. But, Jake learning a pro-style system under Cole was really good for his development mentally.
I think that's going to make Patriots fans really excited to hear you mention what you're mentioning there schematically, because the run game became a huge focus for us covering the team, for fans watching the team this past year, because they changed, and it did look like they were trying to become more of one of these, wide zone or outside zone teams. And then as it got later in the year, they kind of, I think, rediscovered that what they were best at, what they've been best at really for a long, long time, is the stuff you're mentioning, power, right, counter, duo, inside zone. And so it sounds like Jake's got a ton of experience running that sort of stuff. Is there something about Jake as a player individually that makes him a good fit for those types of concepts?
Well,
Joe?
Yeah, I think he's, he's very powerful. I mean, we're talking about a 600-pound squatter, 450-pound bencher, 400 power clean guy, 585 deadlift. I mean, his weight room numbers are off the charts. And I think, Jake is not one of these big 6'5", 6'6" guys. Jake's a little on the smaller side, which is what you want on the interior center position. And so I think he can get up underneath guys and use that lower half and power to really bully some people inside. And so I think those schemes fit him well. We dabbled a little bit in the wide zone and would have ran it a little bit more if I felt more comfortable with the other pieces up front. Jake definitely can do those kind of things as well. But I just felt like we wanted to establish an identity in Troy, downhill, physical, hard nose. You're going to feel us in the fourth quarter type offense, and I think we were able to do that under Jake's leadership.
And did Jake have a wrestling background that I see, Joe? Like, did that pop up for him at all too? Like, did you feel like that foundation that maybe he built as a high school kid, it helped him even well into his football career?
There's no question. You want to you always, when you look for offensive linemen, you find a wrestler. Those guys make natural transition to inside. But I definitely think wrestling, the discipline it takes to be a wrestler and all that stuff that comes with wrestling, I think definitely helped Jake in his progression throughout college.
I'm sort of picking out some of the words that you've used to describe Jake. Powerful, discipline. You talk about his intelligence at the line of scrimmage, getting you guys going in the right direction. When you think back to your time spent with Jake, is there a moment that will stand out to you in turn? Could have been at practice, in the weight room, maybe even during a game, where you think back and you say to yourself that moment, really kind of defined for you who Jake is.
Well, I mean, I think you can pick out several times in practice. When we first got there, we felt like the leadership needed to improve, especially on our side of the ball. And so we really challenged Jake to get out of his comfort zone, and he's a leader by example, but we really challenged Jake to be more vocal. And, and he accepted that challenge. And I remember a lot of times at practice when things weren't going good, it was hot. The offensive line, they work, man, in Indy. They get some work in, and they come to team, and they're dog tired, and they got to go to team now. So I remember several times Jake just speaking up and getting the whole offense going, not just the O-line, but the whole offense going. And he's a great leader. He is a great man. He's a great teammate. It'd be great for the locker room. I just think there's a lot of good things to say about Jake.
Very even keeled, it seemed like, too. There was a video that came out. It looked like he might have been on the phone with Bill Belichick, and he sort of hangs up, but he might be in his recliner in his living room somewhere, and like almost no reaction. And the room's going crazy. It sounds, maybe his mom or some other family was there. The room's going crazy, and he's just, Joe Cool there. Is that sort of who Jake is? Is that a good little encapsulation of who he was right there in terms of his poise, let's call it?
Yeah, there's no question. Up or down in a game, Jake was always even kill, play the next play. Nothing really seemed to ever get it to him, whether a defense was doing something a little funky or whatever it may be. Like, Jake always just stayed that way. I think what you saw there in the recliner was just a sigh of relief. Jake had another year to come back to college and chose to go to the NFL. And, and I think what you saw there was just, you see him took a big, deep breath and just a sigh of relief that all of his hard work had paid off, because he's put in a lot of work. And I think, too, to get drafted by the Patriots is a big deal. And I think that all that stuff kind of hit him all at once. And it was just a big sigh of relief, like, all right, let's go,
Do you think, again, you're a Patriots, self-described Patriots fan, Joe? Do you think that still carries weight for guys that are coming from the college ranks, right? Like, I mean, the Patriots started winning Super Bowls when a lot of these guys, were, I don't know, probably in diapers. I think I remember talking to David Andrews, actually. Now he's like the senior veteran leader on the offense. And I think the Patriots won their first Super Bowl when he was in second grade. So it's like, they've been around for so long. The last couple of years, obviously, 2 of the last 3, they're not even in the postseason. But do you think it still means something to these younger players, that Patriots logo, that Patriots name?
I definitely think so. I mean, anytime you have the best player to ever play the game, leading a team and winning championships and Super Bowls, I mean, it's hard not to follow, and I think even, down here in Alabama, I mean, we see a lot of Patriots games, and I know I used to watch him all the time because I was watching Tom, and I definitely think that still carries a lot of weight with even guys that I'm still coaching in college.
And this might make some of our listeners like a little sick to their stomach, Joe, but I'm just looking at Jake's birthday right now. November 11th, 1999. So he's 23 years old. So when the Patriots won their first one, he would have been 2 years old. Early 2002, he would have been 2 years old. So he literally would have probably still been in diapers. So it is just amazing the run, obviously, that they've had. And so it's no surprise that some of these guys would hold the team in the esteem that they do. The last thing I want to ask you, Joe, as his coach, and you mentioned Cole Popovich, and obviously he comes from the Patriots system. He's actually with the Texans now. So it's
Yep.
Patriots connection there with Nick Caserio as the GM. The Patriots are known for their tough coaching, call it, and everybody thinks of Bill Belichick when we talk about that, but it's not just him. They're not afraid to be hard on players and try to get the most out of them that way. Is that an environment that you think Jake will handle well? Because it does feel like, especially the league's getting younger every day. We know that there are fewer and fewer, I think, high school and college programs that sort of operate that way. So is that something that you think Jake could handle well in New England?
Yeah, I don't think Jake will have an issue with that at all, to be honest. I think Cole did a nice job of coaching him, our best player, just as hard as the weakest player, and he was coached extremely hard last year. I know that for a fact. And, I don't think Jake will have any issues with that. He understands that, coaching, if somebody's coaching you hard, they love you, they care about you, they're trying to get the most out of you. So we tell them all the time, when a coach stops coaching you, that's when you have to worry. So I don't think Jake will have any issue with that. I think he'll embrace that. I think he's a guy, he's a sponge. He wants to continue to learn and get better daily. And I think he'll embrace that very, very well.
Well, Joe, we really appreciate you spending some time with us, talking to us about Jake here. It's been great to learn about him. I mean, you are coming at us. If you're watching on YouTube, listeners, viewers, you'll see Joe's in his car because he is actually on the recruiting trail right now down there in Alabama. So it's busy for you. It's a busy time. I know that. So we really appreciate you spending some of that time with us, Joe, and teaching us about Jake here.
Absolutely. No problem. Got to find a replacement for Jake now. So that's why we're out here recruiting and trying to bring him in.
Well, hey, you got to get to the wrestling mat. It sounds like, right? You got to go find a wrestler, man.
There you go. That's where I'm headed. I'm headed to the wrestling mat. Right now.
Love it. Joe, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. No problem, buddy.
Awesome stuff there from Joe Craddock. Thanks so much to him coming at us from the recruiting trail in his car, going out, getting players, stopping to talk to us about Jake Andrews, whom clearly he loves. Smart guy, powerful guy. Some of those weight room numbers, very, very impressive. And then I think what should get Patriots fans excited is that background with Cole Popovich and his ability to step in and be that Ted Karras type, that do it all, both guard spots and center right away type of player who is so valuable and has been so valuable for these Bill Belichick Patriots teams for many, many years now. I think that's the role he could play, with more coming down the line as he gets more experience and he gets deeper into his pro career here. But the wrestling background, the power, when you talk about the scheme stuff too, again, Cole Popovich understands how to coach these concepts. Jake Andrews obviously executed them and executed them well at Troy. He should be a seamless fit for what the Patriots want to do offensively under Adrian Clem as their new offensive line coach. But with guys like Sidney So, they were a big inside zone team. That's why he played at guard. That's what we heard from Eastern Michigan. Antonio Mafi comes from a pro-style run game, as Andrews does at UCLA with Chip Kelly. They ran a variety of concepts. So all of these guys, it wouldn't shock me if all of them at some point had a role in New England because injuries happen and because they have the ability to do it. They understand what it takes to be a part of that kind of run game. Now, can they do what they need to do in pass protection? That's another conversation. But these guys want to get downhill. They want to maul you. That's who Jake Andrews is. That's what the Patriots want on the offensive line. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to this edition of the Next Pats podcast. We're not going away. We're not going away. We will have content for your ear holes. I promise you. Before we go, I have to mention, have you downloaded the new NBC Sports Boston app yet? If not, what are you doing? It is the latest news, analysis, commentary, and insights from our network stable of experts and insiders, including our guy, Tom Curran, Chris Forsberg, John Tomasi, and yours truly. You can also listen to podcasts, follow live scores and stats, catch highlights, and watch behind-the-scenes content and interviews. You can download the NBC Sports Boston app now in the App Store and on Google Play. Find the link in the show notes. All right, guys, go do that. Thank you again. We'll talk to you very soon.